Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight: the Republican majority in the U.S. House of Representatives shrinks after a Democrat wins a special election in Texas. And President Trump comments on another Texas Democrat win on the same day. A federal judge ordered the release of the 5-year-old boy and his father, who have been in custody since an ICE operation in Minnesota earlier this month. Both were released from a detention center in Texas and have traveled back to Minneapolis. Tensions remain high in the Middle East as Iran's supreme leader threatens a regional war if the U.S. strikes Tehran. This comes as a deadly explosion in Iran, reportedly from a gas leak, killed 1 person and injured 14 others. Jason Perry reports. With a partial government shutdown now underway, what's the broader economic impact? The chief economist at the Heritage Foundation joins us to unpack what's next. NTD attends the 2026 Philadelphia Auto Show. Find out what attendees have to say about EVs and self-driving vehicles. And the Grammy Awards are happening now. We take you to the red carpet to hear from the artists. Find out what to expect from the annual awards show before the night's over.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Democrat Christian Menefee won a Texas special election for the U.S. House of Representatives on Saturday. The result will narrow Republicans' already slender House majority. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the details.
Menefee will replace Congressman Sylvester Turner, a Democrat who died in March. At a victory celebration, Menefee promised to rein in President Trump's illegal immigration crackdown.
Somewhere in the 18th Congressional District, there's an immigrant who's terrified that masked ICE agents, are going to kick in their door and take them back to a land that they haven't been for a very long time. That's why on the campaign trail I talked about my close family member who during the course of this campaign was the victim of a road rage incident and wouldn't go to the hospital, wouldn't go to the police because they were worried that they might get deported.
Menefee further leaned into his position and what his focus will be.
And that's how you know that when I go into Congress, I'm going to fight each and every day to impeach Kristi Noem. To tear ICE up from the roots. And to fix this country's broken immigration system.
Menefee also said he would work as hard as he could to oppose President Trump's agenda and investigate what he referred to as his crimes. Once Menefee is sworn in, the Republican majority in the House shrinks to just 4. Another Texas Democrat won a state Senate special election on the same day. Taylor Ramett flipped a Texas district that Trump won by 17 percentage points in 2024. President Trump told reporters the state Senate loss was too bad and explained his position on it.
You mean I won by 17 and this person lost? Things like that happen.
Does it worry you about the
Well, you don't know whether or not it's transferable. You know, I'm not on the ballot, so you don't know whether or not it's transferable.
The president also shared what he thought Saturday's wins mean for the country.
You put the Democrats in, you'll end up with open borders again. You'll end up with crime all over the place. We have no crime anymore. And I mean, think of it. The country has the lowest crime it's had in 125 years. In recorded history, the year 1900, that's a long time ago.
Trump also said he didn't really know much about the Texas state Senate race, though he knew there were elections happening there.
Next to the little boy seen wearing a blue bunny hat outside his house in Minnesota, Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro confirmed today that the 5-year-old has returned to his home. On Saturday, a federal judge ordered the release of the boy and his father from a family detention center in Texas. Here's more.
The boy and his father, Adrian Conejo Arias, had been in custody for more than a week at the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, Texas, following an ICE operation in Minnesota. The incident was the subject of much controversy and misinformation, as well as criticism from anti-ICE groups. ICE deportation chief Marcos Charles said last week that agents were targeting the boy's father, an illegal immigrant from Ecuador. According to federal officials, the boy's father fled the scene when officers arrived, abandoning the child in a vehicle. Chief Marcos Charles said ICE tried but were unable to return the young boy to his family, who refused to open the door when officers approached the house. In Saturday's release order, the federal judge criticized the federal government's actions. The order states the father and son must be released as soon as practicable and no later than Tuesday, while their immigration case proceeds through the court system. The Department of Homeland Security says parents who are subject to deportation may decide whether they want their children to be removed with them or stay in the United States with a guardian designated by the parent.
Tensions remain high in the Middle East as Iran's supreme leader has now threatened a regional war if the U.S. strikes Tehran. This comes as an explosion in Iran, reportedly caused by a gas leak, killed at least one person and injured 14. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
An explosion tore through part of a building in Iran this weekend. Residents in the Iranian port city of Bandar Abbas gathered around the damaged building to inspect the damage. According to Iranian state-run media, a local fire official said a gas leak caused the explosion. An Iranian official gave the details.
Unfortunately, so far, 14 people have been injured and one person has died, a 4-year-old girl. Technical teams are present at the site and investigating the cause and extent of the incident.
This comes as many are wondering if the United States military is going to strike Iran. On Sunday, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei addressed the situation.
The Iranian nation will strike a strong blow against anyone who attacks and harasses them. Also, Americans should know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war.
President Trump previously warned Iran about shooting peaceful protesters, although Iran International says Tehran killed over 36,000 protesters. Trump also threatened U.S. military action if a deal was not reached to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Recent satellite imagery shows some activity around 2 of Iran's nuclear facilities, such as putting roofs over certain areas to prevent satellites from seeing what's happening on the ground. President Trump on Sunday was asked about the Iranian supreme leader's threat of regional war if Iran is attacked.
We have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
The U.S. military currently has 1 aircraft carrier, 6 destroyers, and 3 littoral combat ships in the region.
I think President Trump is wise enough to make a correct decision.
Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi added this about reaching a possible nuclear deal with the U.S.
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and we fully agree with that. Of course, in return, we expect sanction lifting. So that deal is possible.
Meanwhile, Qatar's foreign ministry said the country's prime minister was in Tehran this weekend and met with Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani. Qatar said the two reviewed efforts to de-escalate tensions in the region. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And joining us now to unpack what's next for the region is David Wormser, Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy and former Senior Advisor to U.S. Vice President Cheney on the Middle East and Strategic Affairs. David, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you. Now, amid the regional tensions, the U.S. has approved arms sales to Israel and Saudi Arabia, totaling over $15 billion. Now, the State Department said the sales wouldn't affect the basic military balance in the region, but would enhance Israel's capability to meet current and future threats. What's your read on these arms sales and how it fits into deterrence in the region?
Well, it is, again, the president is trying to first anchor certain countries to the Western structure. So Saudi Arabia, they're worried about Saudi Arabia drifting off to China or so forth. So arms sales has always been one of the main ways to anchor that. The second thing is, of course, it's good for American industry. These are fairly large ticket items. I think Saudi Arabia was $9 billion. The Israelis are 6 point some billion. There is a time difference, though. The Saudis were talking about a much longer time frame. The Israelis, the Apache helicopters, which you have on the screen here, those are short fuse. The Israelis would be getting 30 of those fairly quickly. So what the president is doing from a strategic point of view is he's selling in the long term to the Saudis, but he's giving or selling to the Israelis much more short term, immediate to the Israelis. And that means that he sees Israel's power as a major element of American deterrence in the region and American power in the region that allows us to reduce our power footprint to some extent.
Now, President Trump told reporters Saturday that Iran was, quote, seriously talking with Washington, suggesting that negotiations are underway. Here's the Iranian foreign minister on what could be on the table for a deal. Let's listen to that now.
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and we fully agree with that. That could be a very good deal. Of course, in return, we expect sanction lifting. So that deal is possible. Let's do not talk about impossible things.
First, how are you reading that? Is it true Iran wants no nuclear weapons? Because reporting seems to point the other way, saying the regime's program is quite developed.
Well, first of all, it has a program that was active in developing a nuclear weapon, and there was activity that could only be interpreted as developing a nuclear weapon. So it's outright dishonest to say it. The second thing is they've never really said that they would want nuclear weapons. They have talked about it obliquely, like, oh, Israel's a one nuclear weapon country that we can wipe out. We will do that, etc. But they've never said we are developing nuclear weapons. They've never admitted to it. So I'm not surprised they wouldn't change it now. But you have to parse what he just said, what Arakchi just said. He said, we don't want nuclear weapons. Trump has said we don't want nuclear weapons. There's a common ground there. President Trump has not said that we don't want Iranian nuclear weapons. He says no nuclear program, because President Trump knows that a nuclear program in Iran will be abused as a military program to develop nuclear weapons. So the terms President Trump's put forward for no nuclear program is quite extensive. Whereas what Arakchi is basically saying, okay, we can have a nuclear program, we just won't develop nuclear weapons, and you'll have to trust us on that. There's no common ground there. And as far as the other unrealistic elements that he mentioned, those are the other demands that President Trump has put forward, which are to dismantle the proxy network, which is choking Israel and has led to a regional war for the last 2.5 years. And then second of all, the missiles, because the missiles are what threatens American troops across the region. It's what threatens Israel. And we just saw that Iran tried, or maybe did, test a 10,000-kilometer range missile, which means that all of Europe is now under Iran's missile threat.
And speaking of concerns over a regional war, the president was asked about that while at Mar-a-Lago. Here's actually what he had to say on that.
Sir, on Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Do you have any response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
How do you see this playing out right now? What are the odds for a negotiated end, and what could that look like?
Well, I think the Iranians are trying to negotiate for a negotiation. President Trump is essentially negotiating an ultimatum. And that's a gap that's not going to be easy to overcome. Where you may see this, I don't think it's going to avert a war. I think the president is pretty far out on a limb now. I think he's set out terms that Iran up front cannot accept. And I think the president is serious about this, and he knows that there would be a huge price to pay if he backs off. But I don't think the question is whether he will strike or not. The question is, once the United States begins an attack on Iran, will it go all the way to bring down the regime, or is there a deal then that can be had? And there may be elements of the Iranian regime that would step forward and say, we're willing to give up on those things and we'll make a deal. You just have to let us survive as sort of a truncated or rump Islamic republic. And then the president is in really a difficult position, because to allow a regime that killed so many people, and ostensibly were there because they killed so many people, is a difficult thing for the president to stomach, and certainly an even more difficult thing for the Israelis to stomach. And you could see the Israelis then taking matters into their own hands and finishing the war for the United States if it isn't finished. So I think the real complexity begins once the war starts. My sense is the Iranian people and the Israelis will go all the way. The Iranian people will rise up as the war begins, and they won't stop. And the Israelis are pretty determined to have this to be the last round with Iran. So my sense is there's a certain trajectory that will happen, even if that's not a fully decided thing at this point.
Definitely a lot to watch for here. David Wormser, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, at least 2 people have died in connection with a weekend snowstorm. We have an update on that, as well as the record snowfall in North Carolina and freezing temperatures in Florida. A major shift in US-Venezuela relations. An American envoy arrives in Caracas as plans move forward to reopen the U.S. Embassy. That and more after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A powerful winter storm slammed the southeast after straightening into a bomb cyclone off the coast today. The system brought hurricane-force winds and heavy snow. About 150 million people were under cold weather advisories and extreme cold warnings in the eastern portion of the U.S. North Carolina was hit hard. Nearly a foot of snow fell in and around Charlotte. Rare snow flurries were seen in Florida as the southern part of the state experienced its coldest air since 1989. The storm triggered major travel disruptions this weekend. According to flight tracking company FlightAware, more than 2,800 flights were canceled nationwide on Saturday. Another 1,500 canceled on Sunday. Across North Carolina, more than 1,000 traffic collisions were reported as of today. Governor Josh Stein said 2 people were killed in the roads. He did not offer more details.
Our key message today is to stay off the roads. That way you'll allow the road crews and law enforcement to focus on their essential tasks to keep us all safe. DOT has 2,500 people out working overtime to try to clear as much snow today as they can. But our fear is that with temperatures staying below freezing today and much of tomorrow, many roads will be bad in many places across the state for days to come.
More than 110 deaths have been linked to the wintry weather. The deaths have been reported nationwide since late January. Meanwhile, power outages continue across the South. In Tennessee and Mississippi, more than 97,000 customers were still without electricity today. That's according to the outage tracking site poweroutage.us. In Tennessee, restoration efforts are ongoing. Nashville Electric Service expects 99% should have power back by next Sunday. A major shift in U.S.-Venezuela relations. U.S. envoy Laura Dogu has arrived in Caracas as Washington moves to reopen its embassy for the first time in nearly 7 years. It signals a major step for the U.S. as it works to restore diplomatic ties after a long freeze. The visit follows a series of high-level contacts between the 2 countries. President Trump spoke about warming relations with Venezuela after the capture of longtime regime leader Nicolas Maduro. Here's what he said aboard Air Force One yesterday.
But we're getting along very well with the leadership of Venezuela. They're doing a really good job. We're going to be selling a lot of oil, and we'll take some, and they'll take a lot. And they're going to do very well. They're going to make more money than they've ever made. And it's going to be beneficial to us. We're going to really, I think Venezuela is really going to turn around. You know,
Venezuela's foreign minister welcomed Dogu's arrival. He called it part of a working agenda between the 2 countries aimed at rebuilding ties and resolving differences through diplomatic dialogue. The U.S. and Venezuela cut diplomatic relations back in 2019 after Maduro ordered a break and both countries closed their embassies. That's after President Donald Trump backed an opposition leader who declared himself Venezuela's interim president. Dogu's visit comes after a U.S. State Department team traveled to Venezuela earlier this month. It's the first such trip since Maduro was captured. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed during a Senate hearing last week that Dogu would ultimately operate out of Venezuela. He added that Washington plans to establish a diplomatic presence in the country very quickly. Meanwhile, President Trump was asked about Venezuela's opposition leader Maria Machado and whether she should return to the country. Here's his response.
I think she's a very fine person. But I think I have to say at the same time, the current leadership is doing a very good job.
Since Maduro's capture last month, the Trump administration has moved quickly to establish more presence in the country. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has already taken steps favorable to Washington. She changed some laws to make it easier for foreign companies to operate in the country's oil sector.
Rodriguez has announced a sweeping amnesty law that could lead to the release of hundreds of prisoners detained for political reasons. The measure excludes those convicted of homicide, drug trafficking, or rights abuses. Here's more.
Venezuela announced a proposed amnesty law for hundreds of prisoners in the country on Friday. Interim President Delcy Rodriguez said the infamous Alicoide detention center in Caracas will be converted into a center for sports and social services. She said the law will cover cases from 1999 until present day, with the goal being to heal wounds left by political confrontation and violence. But, she said, it will exclude those who may have participated in killings, serious abuses of human rights, and drug trafficking. It could also affect former prisoners who have already been conditionally released. Venezuela's opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado praised the proposal.
Obviously, this is not something the regime wanted to do voluntarily, but it is the result of real pressure from the United States government. Hopefully, it is so they say. Hopefully, the more than 700 prisoners who are still in torture centers in Venezuela can be with their families very soon.
Rights advocates have long demanded that charges and convictions against political prisoners be dropped. Many of them are often subject to charges like terrorism and treason, which their families say are unjust and arbitrary.
Next, China's military is tightening control over fuel supplies, a critical part of its combat readiness. This follows a major shakeup within China's military. NTD's Flora Hua has more.
China's People's Liberation Army announced a new rule on Tuesday. It aims to standardize the army's fuel management process and prevent misuse. This is among Beijing's latest efforts to boost its military readiness, coming just days after regime leader Xi Jinping purged 2 top military officials, including the second highest ranking general Zhang Yuxia. On Monday, Taiwan's Minister of National Defense, Wellington Koo, said the Taiwanese government is closely monitoring unusual developments within the Chinese Communist Party and the military. He added that Taiwan's military planning is based on a long-standing reality that China has never ruled out the use of force against Taiwan. Earlier this week, Taiwan's military hosted Air Force and naval drills in preparation to combat any potential assaults from the Chinese military. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Coming up, with a partial government shutdown underway, what's the broader economic impact? The chief economist at the Heritage Foundation joins us to unpack what's next. And NTD attended the Philly Auto Show yesterday. Find out what attendees had to say about EVs and self-driving vehicles coming up. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. House Speaker Mike Johnson today saying he believes he has the Republican votes to end a partial government shutdown by at least Tuesday. It began on Saturday after Congress failed to approve a deal to keep a wide range of operations funded ahead of a midnight deadline. Joining us now to unpack the economic impact of government shutdowns is E.J. Antony, chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. E.J., thank you so much for joining us. Good to have you here. Now, what does this partial shutdown impact? Which workers or industries feel the impact immediately? How fast does that ripple into the broader economy?
Well, hopefully this will actually get resolved before the real economy actually has to deal with any of the effects. If we recall from the last government shutdown, which was the longest in history, the Trump administration did everything it could to actually keep the economy running smoothly, to keep, for example, airports running, to keep airport security and air traffic controllers on the job, and to make sure those operations were running smoothly. So we are hoping that we will actually be able to pass, despite the objections of Democrats, a measure to keep the government open next week, and thereby avoid any kind of any of these negative effects on the American economy and the American people.
On that note, this is now in the hands of the House. Here's Speaker Johnson on how soon the shutdown could end.
So we'll get all this done by Tuesday, I'm convinced. We do have to do it by way of a rule process, which will be probably on our own. I don't understand why anybody would have a problem with this, though. Remember, the bills that have already been passed, we're going to do it again. It's a formality at this point.
Now, Hakeem Jeffries has indicated there will be no Democratic support. How are you watching this? How soon could the government be funded?
As early as this week, in fact, the first half of this week. So again, we are really hoping, we're keeping our fingers crossed here that the Republican Party, since obviously, as you said, the Democrats aren't going to help at all, we are really hoping that the Republican Party is going to be able to pass the necessary funding measures and therefore keep the government open. And look, that's very important at a time when we need, for example, FEMA to have access to the cash it needs to help people who are suffering right now because of recent winter storms, whether those are ice storms in Tennessee or Kentucky, for example, the snowfall and the ice in the Northeast. We're seeing very cold temperatures in both of those areas of the country right now, and a lot of people need that aid. Obviously, the government is doing a lot of other things. We already talked about airport security and air traffic controllers, but all of these things need funding relatively soon to ensure that Americans are actually getting the help that they need, and frankly, the help that they were previously promised.
Now, it seems the current fight is over DHS funding. Senators are only extending funding for 2 weeks there, even though DHS already has multi-year funding from the One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, if the Senate changes DHS policy or structure, does that actually affect the money already approved, or is this more about controlled and cash?
Well, I think if the Senate really tries to make any substantive changes here to DHS, including trying to limit immigration enforcement or limit investigation of fraud, both of which, by the way, are completely legitimate activities of this administration, which have garnered the ire of Democrats, obviously. But if the Senate does try to make any of those ridiculous changes, then what's going to happen, I think, is the House is simply just going to reject those measures. And then we might actually get into some kind of standoff here where we might lose government funding for quite some time. But again, we're trying to remain optimistic and hopeful here that the Senate is not going to try any of those shenanigans, and therefore we can continue to fund the government, as we said. But you are right to point out that thanks to the big, beautiful bill that was passed last year, DHS does have access to several different funding measures. And even though that is spread out over several years, it is a considerable amount of funding that they can tap if they need to in the short term to keep operations going. And that includes immigration enforcement and getting these violent criminals out of our country.
And zooming out a bit here, how do financial markets and investors usually react to shutdowns like this? And how is this one different, say, to the longest government that we just had?
Well, typically, we actually don't see much of a market reaction from the government shutdown. That's for a few different reasons. One is the fact that markets typically are not reliant on government money at all. And we typically don't see much of an impact on the broader economy when we get these temporary interruptions, for example, from government funding. And that was even the case in the last shutdown, which, as we said, was the longest in history. Now, all that being said, if you continue to have these shutdowns, if you continue every month or two to have these constant interruptions in the economy, then you do see a chilling effect on investment. You do see investors, for example, keeping more liquidity, more cash on hand, and that will have an overall slowing effect on economic growth, which clearly is not a good thing. We don't want that to happen. That's one of the reasons why it's imperative that we not only get funding bills through Congress, but also that they be much more than simple 30-day CRs or 2-month CRs, whatever the case may be.
And on that note, with, say, repeated shutdowns or continuing resolutions, how does that play into American confidence?
Oh, it certainly doesn't do any good, right? The more people have to worry about, am I going to be able to travel in a month or two on airlines, right? That was that got very chaotic. Let me put it that way. Towards the end of the last government shutdown, because you had, for example, air traffic controllers. You didn't have enough staff essentially, and therefore you had to reduce the number of flights, and you had to reduce the congestion at airports in order to try to maintain safety standards. And the result of that was a lot of people stranded. It was a lot of canceled flights, a lot of delays, and people obviously were not happy about that. That slows down businesses. for corporate travel. Obviously, it's incredibly inconvenient for personal travel. These are not things that we want the American people to have to endure. So once again, we're very hopeful, and we're going to try to remain optimistic here that the Republicans in Congress are going to be able to get these funding bills through, because, as you've already pointed out, the Democrats have zero intention to lend a hand here, to lift a finger in terms of getting this funding through.
Well, E.J. Antony, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The Philadelphia Auto Show is happening right now, and for the entire first week of February, NTD was there to speak with some of the visitors and capture a glimpse of this year's hottest vehicles. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Once again, the Auto Dealers Association of Greater Philadelphia brings the latest and greatest in the auto world to the public through the Philadelphia Auto Show, a Philadelphia tradition since 1902. And this year's event is the biggest it's been since the times of COVID.
Oh, it's very cool. It's a bit like an amusement park for adults.
And it's not just an amusement park for adults, this also has some amusement for the kids. Whether it's electric, gas, or hybrid vehicle, the Philly Auto Show has it all. People usually prefer one over the others.
I'd say probably the gas or the hybrid. I don't know if I want to do an all-electric, because what if we're going somewhere and it runs out of power and we got nowhere to charge it? I guess it's like more so I just want to make sure I get to my next destination without not being able to get there because we're out of a charge kind of thing.
I mean, I would drive an all-electric vehicle if it was, if it worked and it had good mileage and all that, I don't really have a preference as long as it kind of makes sense for, economy-wise.
I'm not really a, electric cars. Maybe I'd do a hybrid, but I'm more a gas person. Running out of battery, how the distance, how long, how far you can go.
Charging stations.
Yeah, charging stations, the cost of, of that, and setting it up at home, how that would work. So that's what I think about.
Another hot topic that continues to circulate is self-driving vehicles. Attendees gave some of their thoughts and opinions on them.
I think I'm starting to get used to the idea a little bit, I haven't heard of any accidents, so, I think it'd be pretty neat to be in one, A friend of mine has a Tesla, and he drove all the way from the suburbs of Philly to Philly. He let it drive itself. So it's kind of cool.
I don't trust it. I guess I just have to educate myself more, of it, but I like to be in control of what I'm driving.
No, on our way over here today, I was driving, and we actually had someone on the highway cut into our lane, and I was able to take evasive action and get out of the way, and that's reason number one why I would not trust the EV, because I don't think the EV would have done it. I don't think it would have done it fast enough. No way. Not the EV, I'm sorry, the self-driving car. I don't think a self-driving car would have got out of the way. Nope, not happening.
Nope, I'll drive myself. I enjoy it. It's a fun time. Appreciate the Philly Auto Show. It's always a good time to come over with the kids, let them run around.
Some of these beautiful exotic cars are for sale if you have a couple of $1 million laying around. The 2026 Philly Auto Show runs from January 31st to February 8th. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Australia's Electro-Optic System says it plans to move its base and stock listing to Europe within a year, potentially becoming the first major defense firm to do so. The maker of a high-energy laser defense system says Ukraine has requested the technology, but funding remains uncertain. European partners want further testing before committing. Here's more.
The Australian-based company making these laser weapons may soon call Europe home, in a strategic pivot that could boost Europe's defense buildup and offer a cost-effective countermeasure for Ukraine. Electro-Optic Systems, or EOS, plans to relocate its headquarters and stock market listing to Europe within a year, which, if done, would make them the first major defense company to move permanently to Europe. It produces the Apollo high-energy laser weapon, which uses an invisible and silent beam of light to burn through targets, sending drones tumbling to the ground. CEO Andreas Schwer claims it's a superior and much less expensive alternative to conventional rockets, missiles, and guns, encountering the growing threat of drone warfare.
The laser is extremely cheap because there is no ammunition supply needed. You can shoot down a drone for cost of the energy, which is between $1 and $5 per shot.
EOS's product could get a real-world test in Ukraine. Schwer says it has received requests for the Apollo weapon from the Ukrainian government, but has yet to find a country willing to foot the bill, despite offering discounted prices. He adds that most of their Western European partners want to test and verify the system themselves before funding it for Ukraine, though they are not yet deployed at scale. And Europe's high-energy laser programs remain largely in prototype or research and development. Schwer says EOS production and engineering facilities are already being set up in Germany, and that they are in talks with 10 European governments about future orders.
Dave Rossi is the author of Alphas Die Early. In this interview, he challenges the instinct to blame others when things go wrong, arguing that blame and shame block self-awareness and personal growth. Rossi explains how learning to pause between stimulus and response and taking responsibility for our reactions can change outcomes, reduce conflict, and build emotional resilience.
I think another good point that you talk about in your book and we talked about earlier is when something happens, the first instinct many times is to blame someone else and say, oh, this happened, it's your fault, you need to fix it, you cut me off driving or whatever, right? But you're bringing up another aspect, which is to kind of check yourself and see how you can fix the problem from the inside. Tell us more about it, because again, that's a unique thing that I think it's very interesting and very good, but it's not very common.
Well, if you want to grow, you have to go back to looking at things more objectively. If you blame somebody, you immediately have lost objective reality or objective positionality. You're saying this happened because of that person, and you're instantly cut off any self-awareness or self-actualization. Shame is kind of tied to blame because it's kind of like an internal blame. Shame is you blaming yourself that comes with a judgment and a negative stigma of yourself to lower your self-esteem. Both blame and shame prevent you from seeing things more objectively. The thing that people don't realize is everybody plays a role of where they are in life. And if you blame, you're not able to implement humility or gratitude or choice around ego. So if I get cut off driving a car and I blame them for cutting me off and I have anger, a reactive behavior of anger, they've taken my territory without my authority. They did something that's not socially accepted, so they're to blame for me being angry. The first thing you do is you don't take accountability for your own reactive behavior to change what you feel. Now, there's lots of things you could change. Well, like?
But just a quick on this one. It happened to me so many times that someone cut me off.
Yeah.
And then I'm upset and I'm thinking, why is he doing that? But then I try to take a step back and look at what happened. Maybe a few seconds before, I was driving slow because I was looking at my phone.
Yeah.
I was blocking the person behind me.
Yeah.
It was without realizing it, completely without realizing it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he cut me off and he's upset,
And you blame him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's lots of ways to recontextualize that, and that's one of them, which is 5 minutes ago was looking at my phone and I was driving slow. I don't blame him. You could also say that poor guy is in a hurry and hopefully he gets where he gets to go safely.
Right.
And I'm happy to sacrifice some space for him. Another thing is, what's the big deal? I mean, really, what is the big deal about someone? Is it really that big of a deal? Is it worth getting in a fight over it? And I think usually, those reactive behaviors can snowball, right? You get into situations where maybe you honk and then they honk back and then they get angry and then all of a sudden they're following you and it becomes a worse situation. But if you do not stop, and I think Viktor Frankl says this very well in Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, it's a small moment in time. If you can't grab that small moment in time, stimulus, someone cuts you off, reaction, you honk back. Stimulus, they cut you off, reaction, you flip them off. Right? Stimulus, they cut you off, reaction, you yell at them, where you have anger, right? There's a small little moment in time between that.
That you can make a decision.
Right, and change the course.
Yeah.
If you can't grab that small moment in time and say, okay, is it really a big deal? I was on my phone a couple minutes ago, and maybe I just have compassion for this guy and hope maybe his wife's dying.
Right.
And maybe he's racing. I don't know what's going on. Maybe if I knew his wife was dying, maybe I'd give him a break and let him cut me off 100 times if that was the case. So I think if you can't grab that, you can't recontextualize life. And you can use that in all kinds of examples. People just don't.
Coming up, the 68th Annual Grammy Awards are airing now. Find out all the excitement from the red carpet as musical artists arrive. And colorful boats and fancy costumes pack Venice's Grand Canal as the city marks the start of this year's carnival with a special theme focused on the Olympics. That's coming up. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The 68th Annual Grammy Awards are airing right now. Comedian and former host of The Daily Show, Trevor Noah, is hosting the big night for a 6th time. The annual award show celebrates the best in music.
There's no gatekeepers. There's no one standing in the way between you and your audience, and I think that has opened it up for everybody.
Country music, particularly, I feel like the past few years has elevated to a newer place for itself. I think we all feel like trying to take it more globally, and
it's always wonderful to get acknowledgement from your peers, the people that work in the academy and the people that vote. They're my peers. They're the music community. So when they pat you on the back and say, good job, we acknowledge you, that always feels great. That, to me, almost feels as good, if not better, than winning, to be perfectly honest.
The red carpet opened at the Crypto.com Arena in downtown Los Angeles. The Grammy ceremony is poised to crown several first-time winners of the music industry's biggest honors. Puerto Rican rapper Bad Bunny is competing for Album of the Year. His album could make history as the first Spanish-language winner. The award went last year to Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter. If Kendrick Lamar wins for his album GNX, he would be the first solo male rapper to win the award. Only 2 hip-hop musicians have ever been honored in the category. For pop singer Lady Gaga, the album prize would be the first of her career. She has never won any of the top 4 Grammy prizes, despite more than 2 decades in the music business. The Golden single from the successful K-pop Demon Hunters movie is competing for Song of the Year. Trevor Noah says this will be his last time hosting the Grammys. In Italy, the Venice Carnival kicked off today with a colorful water parade. This year's carnival carries an Olympic theme that reflects Italy's role as host of the 2026 Winter Games. A traditional giant rat-shaped structure opened the celebration on the Grand Canal.
The atmosphere is definitely one of joy for the Games, which should always be valued just like sport. In short, we should be proud that the Olympics are here in Italy this year and that Italy has so much to offer.
It's wonderful to see all these people in costume, beautiful, a really nice atmosphere.
The carnival is titled Olympus at the origins of the game. The theme celebrates sport and ancient mythology and also marks the year Italy hosts the Winter Olympics and Paralympics. As always, revelers dressed creatively. Many wore traditional Venetian costumes. Others chose Olympic-themed outfits. Some even disguised themselves as a pope. The Venice Carnival dates back centuries. It began as a time of excess before Lent, the 40-day period of fasting before Easter. During Carnival, Venetians could hide behind masks. They were free to act without revealing their identities. In the 18th century, masks had another purpose. Noblemen used them to remain anonymous while voting on council matters. This year, the carnival runs through February 17th. A new museum in Tokyo is honoring samurai. Different exhibits give visitors an opportunity to try on armor and hold swords that originally belonged to Japan's ancient warriors. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Ryo Tamura is a descendant of a samurai. He's also a martial arts expert, but he's been largely quiet about his lineage and heritage.
If anything, people tend to see it as something obscure, someone quietly passing down strange or unsettling techniques. I did not live in hiding, but I rarely spoke openly about it.
Samurai served Japanese nobility from the late 12th century until the practice was abolished in the late 1870s. In addition to their combat abilities, the warriors were known for loyalty, honor, and discipline.
Japan has lived without experiencing war for a rather long time and has passed through a peaceful era. Possibly because of that, samurai forget conflict. During the Edo period, when relative peace prevailed, more than 260 years, I have a slight concern that we are losing the spirit of it too.
Tamura is concerned Japan is losing that culture. Samurai armor and weapons are on display at this newly opened museum in Tokyo. Visitors get a chance to handle the weapons and equipment. Tamura hopes the experience helps renew interest in the ancient warriors.
With the help from people outside Japan who are interested in samurais, I strongly hope that the samurai culture will be rediscovered and reintroduced with its new values.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Across time, cultures, and species, animals awakening from hibernation have been unlikely forecasters relied upon for weather prognostications before satellites, newscasts, and apps. In Europe, a sacred bear or badger was sought out for guidance, but Germans settling in Pennsylvania in the 18th and 19th centuries looked to a different animal, the humble groundhog. The first official Groundhog Day dates back to 1887, when the people of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania made their first trek to Gobbler's Knob, marking the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Now, every February 2nd, this small town welcomes thousands of visitors to see the world's most famous animal meteorologist, Punxsutawney Phil. If Phil comes out of his hole and sees his shadow, he regards it as an omen of more bad weather ahead and goes back into his burrow for 6 more weeks of winter sleep. But if Phil emerges on a cloudy day, he takes it as a sign of spring and stays above ground. The tradition is carried on by Punxsutawney's Groundhog Club's Inner Circle, a group of local dignitaries in top hats and tails who make sure the legend lives on.
We're true believers. We actually believe in Punxsutawney Phil and Groundhog Day, and also we want to help support our community and make sure that Phil continues on.
And we will bring you Phil's forecast on NTD's Monday news. Stay tuned. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.